I've been developing this over a series of teaching this course at Emerson. I'm on number 3 or 4 now. And so I've kind of, each time I teach it, I learn a bit. I restructure it, and I've kind of shaped it into this, what I would view. I describe it to my students on the first day as if I knew that I was going to die, and this is the last chance I had to communicate what I think is most important that I've learned from my experience about the filmmaking process as an independent filmmaker. What would that information be? And it's very condensed. So normally we're teaching this over the course of 5 classes, 3 hours long each, and really within 4, because the last class we're usually workshopping most of the time. So we cover a lot. We're covering the most important things through the lens of the traditional production model, but is designed for independent filmmakers who are working with 1-2 people on their crew, working on the weekends, but looking at it through the lens of a traditional producer, which my background is in the traditional production model of budgeting and scheduling a film. This is where I really realized that it's those processes really help with teaching screenwriting. Oftentimes students are studying screenwriting and they'll study screenwriting and they will never learn how to do a breakdown, how to budget, what are all the different positions on crew, because what does that have to do with writing? Well, it actually has everything to do with writing, because screenwriting format is designed for the purpose of translating across the entire process. So a line producer can take that screenplay, measure it by 1/8 of a page, and that is a language that translates. Yeah.
Structure of the course, maybe?
Yeah.
I like the part about,
Yeah.
they don't realize that, those
Yeah.
things are, so,
Structure of the course.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, basic structure of the course. We start with camera fundamentals. And students, this is designed to benefit students who come in with already a working professional. Maybe you're a videographer who does weddings, promos. Maybe you are a narrative filmmaker already. It's also designed to benefit students at a base entry level. So we're going to move very quickly through the base core, 3 core camera concepts: ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Understanding what those things mean and how they all affect one another. You have to understand those 3 concepts. That's going to take your understanding of the camera to the next level. We're going to be covering the software side of editing, color correction, sound design. We're going to talk about the options for if you don't own Adobe Premiere, what can you do? DaVinci Resolve. What can you do if you only have Adobe Premiere for sound design? There's a lot of sound design you can do just within Adobe Premiere or whatever software you have. This course is designed for you to make the most out of not a bunch of expensive software. I had a student last class that just had a GoPro and was editing on the GoPro editing platform. And she did her entire film just with a GoPro and the GoPro editing software. So we then move into examining the traditional production model, the roles on set, the different departments. So that if you were to the next day, if you were to step on set and you were hired to be a PA, you would understand the language. You would understand this moving organism and why people are doing what they're doing. The different departments, department heads, above the line, below the line, art department, grip and electric, production design, the hair and makeup. It's pivotal to understand all of those people, what they do, what their roles are, because then we're moving into understanding a script breakdown. So to best describe this, when I was learning this, shout out to Bob Goss, we were handed as students at UNC School of the Arts, we were handed a screenplay, paper, printed out, told, go home, I want you to bring this back, I want you to have it budgeted, I want a budget for how much it would cost to make this, I want to see every department, how much is being allocated to every department, and I want you to schedule this movie as well. And that is producing, that is the essence of producing, the logistics of bringing this, of taking the screenplay and bringing it to life. But as I said before, that process is going to teach you so much about the writing process as well. Then we're going to move into some of the most useful information that I've acquired that I wish I had known sooner, but it's ever evolving. So it's changed since I was first in film school, and that is distribution deals, working with distributors, working with agents, and festival circuit. How to strategically go about approaching the festival circuit, avoiding ripoffs, which is a really interesting topic. I really like this part of it because the landscape is changing so much in online festivals. People are getting ripped off, and there's so many hilarious but tragic stories. But then we'll simulate distribution deals, and I will present potential distribution deals, and you will mentally be like, okay, yeah, I'll take that deal, and then I'll show you how that deal is going to play out down the road, and the reality of these distribution deals, where your minimum guarantee up front, often with the way these are structured, that's the only money you're ever going to see, and how not putting a cap on expenses, marketing expenses, is going to allow the distributor then to go to a film festival or a market, and then promote your film along with 5 others, then charge all 5 of you for that, and there's no way to audit it. And I've gone through this personally myself. I learned a lot working as an assistant to a talent agent, a literary talent agent who worked with directors and writers in Los Angeles. I worked in New York, and just bringing all of that experience through, bringing that experience through that traditional lens with the gatekeepers, the unions, navigating like if you want to get someone to act in your film in their SAG, are they allowed to work in your movie? How do you get around this? And I'll tell you stories about how I did it, and we will use an example feature film that you can find on this channel, As the Crow Flies. You can click below to find that, and that is a feature film that was filmed where I grew up, and I wrote that with some classmates of mine just as we were about to graduate film school, and then right out of the gate we raised $25,000 to make it. And I mean, we learned a lot about the whole process. Looking back on it, it's like, did we need a crew of 25 people? And now looking at the process of where we could cut things, and was it enough money? We'll tell you the story about it, and it's quite an adventure all the way through distribution. It was a couple of years long. So check out that film, and if this looks like something that you would be interested in, join us. More to come. We'll be discussing the writing process. Now we get to story structure, and this is one of my favorite topics as well, and everybody's going to have a different writing process. We're going to examine the writing process of the greats, Quentin Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, how they approach structure, why do they succeed when so many others do not, and what wisdom there is to gain from that. And working with Vlad, who's teaching music and teaching this stuff as well, we have some cool dialogue and some cool conversations that you can check out, where we just kind of analyze whether it's Hans Zimmer musically or Tarantino. Vlad's brilliant musically and a musical mind. So we get some in-depth conversation with that, just like we will with stories. So for example, a sample lesson would be about subtext, where we will examine a scene and the overall takeaway. Well, let's put it this way: that there's an ocean. You have the surface of the water, and then there's boats on the surface of the water, and those boats are words, the words that we speak. Everything below the surface is subtext. Words, they're just tools that we use. They're not the most important thing. They're not the deepest truth. They're not our most authentic voice. They're just an attempt to get at something, and we don't walk around saying what we really think, what we really mean. And when you can learn to speak with the subtext and have your characters communicate that way, oftentimes the most important thing in the scene will be what is not being said. And that's when you get into the next level of writing. That's what's going to really take stories to the next level, and that's what separates great writing from just your average writing where people are telegraphing, and it goes beyond just show don't tell, which we hear so often. It's really getting to the psychology of how story structure. We were just talking, Vlad and I were just talking about a project we've been developing, and it took forever to figure out the linear what happens, and then we have that, and then it's like, okay, now the challenge is figuring out how we tell what happens, because it's not just about what happens, it's about figuring out. So for example, Memento, you take Memento literally as a linear story about this happens, B happens, C happens, D happens. Okay, well, you know it happens, but it's not necessarily, doesn't play out that exciting with the audience. It's not a successful film until it's the way that he structured it, that Nolan structured it, the way that it was told that made that film so compelling and took us to the next level. So it's not just figuring out the beats about the plot, that what happened, but it's about how do we deliver this in a way that, yeah, it comes from this deep place that music does as well, this deeper voice that subtext comes from, this beneath the surface, everything beneath the surface of the water.